377 377. That's 027...
Right, Baldrick, stick the gag on. Good afternoon, ladies. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Edmund Blackadder, and this is my servant. Baldrick, the gag goes on the woman.
Oh, sorry. Ow!
As I was saying, ladies, today I'm trying to raise money for children in need. So far, I have myself generously donated the entire contents of Baldrick's wallet. As you know, I'm very fond of lovely little children. I've even brought a poor, sweet, needy, little tiny child to the studio here today.
Goo.
Oh, for heaven's sake, Baldrick, stick your back into it. Cheques can be made out to Edmund Blackadder's Children in Need appeal. But right now, I want you to phone in and pledge lots and lots and lots of money. Major credit cards welcome. Give them the number, Baldrick.
Yeah, just one thing. Who's this Major Credit Cards bloke?
He's related to corporal punishment, which is what you'll be getting if you don't shift it, Baldrick. Just give them the number.
Right. And the number is 02... big number, 2, 3, big number, 3, big number.
Oh, good grief, give it to me. 02723773777. Right, start coughing up, ladies. Meanwhile, I'm sick and tired of continually hearing whinging women whining on about the problems of life in 1988. So we're going to take you back in time to see how really awful life could be. Get phoning in now. We start with the 16th century.
Hello again, and as you'll have gathered by now, today's is a very different woman's hour. The number for Children in Need pledges again, 0272 377 377. Meanwhile, it's 1599. There's a woman on the throne, an elderly virgin dancing to hold death at bay, whose collection of silks and satins, sables and fine lace is so lavish it required the invention of the walk-in wardrobe to house it. Your dinner party guests are smacking their lips over roast swan and syllabub. Our hips are bolstered by bum rolls and our waists nipped by iron-hinged corsets. And for the nobly born woman, the biggest threat to peace of mind is the Queen announcing she'd like to pay you a ruinously expensive visit. And the less nobly born, well, they're slaving away in the kitchens, being beaten by their menfolk, catching the pox or the plague, and dying in childbed. But isn't that the way it's always been? As the newly meek Mrs. Petruchio concludes in Mr. Shakespeare's play, The Taming of the Shrew,
such duty as the subject owes the prince, even such a woman oweth to her husband. And when she is froward, peevish, sullen, sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul, contending rebel and graceless traitor to her loving lord?
And here in the BBC's half-timbered Globe studio, I'm pleased to welcome one of our most promising playwrights, William Shakespeare.
One more, Barman. Thank you.
William, or should I call you Will?
As you like it, love.
Will, you've been criticised for the way that you portray women.
Yeah?
Take Lear's daughters, Goneril and Regan.
Wish you would, love.
I see.
Yeah.
Or Lady Macbeth. Now, she comes across as a monster. Is she meant to be or not to be?
That is the question, Jenny. See, one thing you have to understand about the theatre business, my old love, is nobody gives a groat for the playwright. You need an eye like Mars to threaten and command just to get your name on the script. I mean, look at my old mate, Frankie Bacon. I mean, if he doesn't hire himself a good agent, he could end up being remembered as an essayist.
Surely not.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, dead soldier. And I don't mean Coriolanus, Barman. Anyway, now, the way I first wrote Lady M, she made the beds, poured the sack, the honoured hostess bit, la-di-da-di-da, minor character. First week of rehearsal, up comes the lad who's playing her. Master playwright, he says. I thought, here's another one, fresh out of Italia Conte, dressed in a little brief authority. Master playwright, he goes, I like not the size of my part. Well, stuff some handkerchiefs down your codpiece, I says. Plenty left over from Othello. Anyway, it turns out he means his lines. You know, he wants more of them. And he's got an influential uncle. Uncle me no uncles. So, back to the scribbling board, big rewrite job, plot goes out the window. You see, in the original version, Lady M shops her old man, marries Macduff, and devotes herself to good works.
What about all those weak women, then, like Ophelia?
Ophelia, weak? Yeah, she's a blooming firebrand. Now, wait a minute. Which version have you been reading? Is it the one where she falls in the pond?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's censorship for you. Sweets to the sweet, farewell. Sweet, that's a joke. She was a political activist, for Christ's sake.
She was?
Oh, I mean, you realise she's Irish. Come on. Ophelia. Huh? I mean, I see her as the catalyst of Hamlet's radical awakening. I mean, they have a passionate debate, quick one behind the arrows, and then it's on with the mask and get thee to an armoury and so
Isn't
forth.
it nunnery?
Nunnery. Oh, thank you very much, Lord Chamberlain. That lean and slippered pantaloon.
You mentioned boy actors. What do you think of the recent controversial suggestion that the acting profession ought to be open to women?
Oh, it's dreamt of in my philosophy, Jenny. In fact, we just put on a special season. Women Reclaim the Globe, with the secret Black and Midnight Hags drama group. Lovely girls. The Taming of the Weasel, Two Gentlewomen of Verona, Julia Caesar...
Julia Caesar?
No. Julia Caesar, you see? But I think we were ahead of our time, quite frankly. You see, the thing is, Jenny, they please not the million. Look, I've got some cuttings here.
So, to sum up, you would maintain that your plays are sympathetic to women.
My dear old love, from women's eyes, this doctrine I derive. They are the books, the arts, the academes that show, contain, and nourish all the world. No, I can't say fairer than that, can I?
Will Shakespeare, thank you for talking to Woman's Hour. Just one final question, though. The mysterious dedication in your new collection of sonnets.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this W.H.?
Jenny, you have to ask?
Right, well, as you can see, women in the 16th century were a good deal less well off than they are today.
Well, I think I'll send all my money to them, then.
Yes, Baldrick, two problems. A, your entire personal fortune wouldn't suffice to buy the wool to knit a leg warmer for an ant's pogo stick. B, unfortunately, the post office don't run a 16th century mail service.
Oh, yes, they do. How?
I do the jokes, Baldrick. So, ladies, please send your cash to us here in aid of poor little dewy-eyed mites everywhere. Give them the address, Baldrick.
The address is Blackadder's personal slush account number 2, Banco Gigantico of Zurich, Switzerland. How?
So far, we've amassed £320 in pledges for children in need. 12-year-old Lucy Wallace has pledged £2 from her pocket money. One man has said he'll offer us £5 if Woman's Hour stays in the Middle Ages. We've an offer from a listener in Northumberland of a day's salmon fishing on the River Tweed, and that will be going now to the highest bidder by the end of the programme. Can we start the bidding at £50? The number to ring, 0272 377 377. 0272 377 377.
Right, the money raised so far is a disgrace. I can only assume that most of you are still getting on your potholing gear prior to venturing into your handbags. So while we wait for you to scramble down through the rubble, we are now going to the 19th century. When we get back, I want to see an improvement or there'll be trouble.
When a girl loves a boy, there's no time they enjoy like the twilight and the hour of the day.
The Pall Mall Gazette, 6th of July, 1885. The report of our secret commission will be read today with a shuddering horror that will thrill throughout the world. After this awful picture of the crimes at present committed, as it were under the very aegis of the law, has been unfolded before the eyes of the public, we need not doubt that the House of Commons will find time to raise the age of consent.
And at Woman's Hour, we've been following with interest social reformer Josephine Butler's campaign to raise the age of consent from 13. Now, amongst women, Mrs. Butler already has thousands of followers. This week, though, sees the trial of one of her most influential male supporters, the journalist W.T. Stead, editor of the Pall Mall Gazette. Our reporter Jenny Cuff's been in court throughout the case, and she reports now live from London on its final day. Jenny, could you remind us first what Mr. Stead's charged with?
He's charged with abducting 13-year-old Eliza Armstrong from her home in Marylebone. That sounds very dastardly, but to understand it, you've got to be aware of the campaign he's been running in his newspaper, the Pall Mall Gazette.
Which, of course, has been one of the most shocking articles that Victorian England has seen in print.
It has. I think it's shocked the whole nation. In July, if you remember, those articles appeared appeared under the heading The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon. In them, Mr. Stead chronicled the story of a 13-year-old girl called Lily. We now know that she is Eliza Armstrong. He tells how she was sold by her drunkard mother for prostitution, taken to a brothel here in London, and left in a bedroom to receive a male client. Well, during this trial, we've learned that the whole thing was set up by Mr. Stead and others, but it was used to illustrate what he claims is a common practice. The information he and his secret commission acquired was made public under some eye-catching headlines.
Violation of virgins. During a confidential interview with one of the most experienced officers, who for many years was in a position to possess an intimate acquaintance with all faces of London crime, I asked him, is it, or is it not a fact, that at this moment, if I were to go to the proper houses, well introduced, the keeper would, in return for money down, supply me with a maid, a genuine article, I mean, not a mere prostitute tricked out as a virgin, but a girl who had never been seduced? Certainly, he replied without a moment's hesitation. Do you mean to tell me, I said, that actual rapes, in the legal sense of the word, are constantly being perpetrated in London on unwilling virgins, procured to rich men at so much a head by keepers of brothels? The very thought of it is enough to raise hell. It is true, he said, and although it ought to raise hell, it doesn't even raise the neighbours.
So you mean to say that girls, virgins, are being deliberately sold to brothels and men are seeking them out?
Well, I know it's hard to believe, but the evidence seems conclusive. They're being sold sometimes by their parents, sometimes on a systematic basis. A few years ago, remember, Josephine Butler and Alfred Dyer exposed a white slave trade where girls were being shipped abroad to brothels in Paris and Holland and Brussels. Well, Mr. Stead has revealed that the same thing is happening on our own doorstep. And the villains who run it talk quite openly. One said he'd ruined 2,000 young girls. Another boasted of a client who took 70 virgins a year. In my own researches, I've been astounded by the frankness with which brothel keepers discuss their affairs, like this woman who owns an outwardly quiet-looking villa in West London.
In my house, you can enjoy the screams of the girl with the certainty that no one else hears them but yourself. The house stands in its own grounds. The walls are thick. There is a double carpet on the floor. The only window which fronts onto the back garden is doubly secured, first with shutters and then with heavy curtains. You can lock the door, and then you can do as you please. The girl may scream blue murder, but not a sound will be heard.
What's being done to protect these children?
As you know, Mr. Stead's campaign to raise the age of consent from 13 to 16 has succeeded, and that should help protect children if it's properly enforced. But many people believe the root cause is poverty, and girls go into prostitution in order to survive. And that's the problem we should now address.
What about Josephine Butler? What part has she been playing in all this?
She's been campaigning for women for many years now. First, she started in the higher education field. She got involved with the issue of prostitution when the Contagious Diseases Acts were passed in the 60s. They gave the moral police the right to stop any woman suspected of being a prostitute, submit her to a rigorous, unpleasant medical examination, and, if necessary, send her to the Lock Hospital or prison. All along, Josephine Butler has been fighting for repeal of those acts. I've been talking to one of her fellow campaigners, Jenny Uglow.
Josephine Butler was asked to head the Ladies' National Association to protest against these acts. And she had been involved with rescue work with prostitutes in Liverpool before. And as she and all the other women campaigners became more and more involved, they realised it wasn't simply a question of women's rights, that these women were being made into second-class citizens, deprived of the rights of the rest of the population, but that also a terrible double standard was being employed, in that it seemed to be perfectly all right for the soldiers to use a prostitute, or indeed for the aristocracies in this recent case, or other people to have access to working-class girls and working-class women. But the women that were so used would be made into a sort of outcast group.
It's quite the fashion, I find, in London among the upper classes to talk of this subject as though women were tempters, harpies, devils, while men are wholly innocent. You know very well that young men go through 2 or 3 years of profligacy, or, as it is mildly expressed when applied to men, to sow their wild oats. Well, it's exactly the same with these women, and yet you never hear anyone say, "Have you found any conscience in these men? Or are they entirely unhumanized? Have they any spark of modesty or manliness left?"
She and the people who've worked with her, the women, have been called a shrieking sisterhood, but she's amazingly brave. Not only has she lobbied Parliament and talked to influential people, but she's travelled all over the country. There have been huge meetings all over the country. And at some of these meetings, excrement has been thrown at her. Once bales of hay were set afire below the room that she was speaking, and she's been set upon by a mob of men. While the police, who were supposed to protect her, but were also the people that were implementing these acts, simply looked on. And she's campaigned now for many years, and sometimes has felt ill and weak, but has continued with the struggle.
How do you think this present court case, this Eliza Armstrong affair, will influence her campaign?
I think that it will influence her campaign in that it will make, and has made, many people see the widespread nature of the exploitation of women and of girls. And I'm quite sure that this will help towards the eventual repeal of the Acts. But I hope also, what we really want is to bring about a change in attitude between men towards women, which is really the way that most women involved in this campaign feel that the solution to the problem will come.
And as to Mr. Stead, Jenny, I understand he's been found guilty.
Yes, I'm sentenced to 3 months in prison, but without hard labour.
Perhaps deservedly, since his journalistic techniques were perhaps somewhat questionable. Jenny Cuff, thank you.
Twilight, out in the beautiful twilight, they all go out on a walk home. I like it full and the dog.
Right, let's see the total. Another miserable effort.
Oh, ladies, I appeal to you.
Aldrich, that is a lie. The only woman you've ever appealed to is your mother. Where should we send them to next?
What about the Crusades?
The Crusades? There weren't any women there.
No, but there were plenty left behind. Must have been miserable for them without any about.
Sitting here alone with you, Bullock, I know how they feel.
The Diary of Rosalind Villiers, dictated in secret to sympathetic old scribe. St. Boniface's Day, 1388. Woke early to sound of dogs tearing stag to pieces beneath my window, and Cousin John practising on the crumhorn in the next room. Have a headache, but dare not tell nurse, as I cannot face any more of her foxglove tea. After chapel, Mother summons me to her chamber to say that Father is leaving for the Crusades next month. We both try to hide our relief. Loud noise is heard in passage, Father whipping Geoffrey, the new kitchen boy. Mother says what Father needs is a couple of years whipping Saracens and Turks. Mother also reveals that she has good news. My chastity belt is to be taken off. Cannot believe my ears and burst into tears of joy. Try to remember what it was like to sit down comfortably, and rejoice to think that I shall soon be able to. Also look forward to walking without clanking. I embrace Mother gratefully, but notice she looks guilty. A marriage has been arranged for you, she says, with Robert the Unhinged. We are very pleased for you, my dear. He is of royal blood. Mother asks me if I do not think him a fine bridegroom. I say, yes, admirable, apart from his being 56, fat, mad, and covered with warts. Mother locks me in my room in a fit of vexation. I'm to be without food and drink for 24 hours. Nurse smuggles in piece of marzipan specially prepared for me by Geoffrey, the kitchen boy. My heart leaps as I find there is a note hidden inside. A declaration of love, surely. Unfold note with trembling fingers, but alas, cannot read. Neither can Nurse, but she takes note to lonely hermit on hill who can. Nurse returns 4 hours later, disappointed. Hermit says, message not fit for young girls' ears. I wonder sometimes what is. After 10 hours, Mother relents and says I may join her for a little needlework in the gallery. 2 hours tapestry work with Mother. Ask her why we can't do a tapestry with more excitement in it, like great-great-great-Aunt Matilda's. I love that bit where Harold gets the arrow in his eye. Mother retorts that flowers are more suitable subject for young girls. Plead with Mother for longer engagement to Robert the Unhinged, and point out that I'm only 14 and he is 56. You'd better marry him quick then, she says, before he dies. Mother observes that Robert the Unhinged is bound to die soon, or go away on the Crusades, and when he dies I will be a rich widow and able to do as I please. I've always fancied myself in black. I wonder if Geoffrey will be head chef by then. At the thought of the Crusades, Mother's eyes light up, and the next moment there's a knock on the door. It is Uncle William come to give her viol lesson. Uncle William is unable to go on crusades owing to flat feet, pigeon toes, and ingrowing toenails. But I have to admit, he's not bad looking from the knees up for a middle-aged man of 32. Mother insists she must take her viol lesson alone, and I am banished to the battlements. Cannot hear much sound of viols, but expect there is a lot of theory to get through. From the battlements, I catch a glimpse of Geoffrey pulling up cress in the kitchen garden. I shout and wave, but the wind carries my words away. Then suddenly, as if he senses something, Geoffrey looks up, sees me, falls onto his knees, and bursts into song of desperate love. Unfortunately, I cannot hear him, as wind blows his words away too. Father and friends return from hunting, and Father smites Geoffrey playfully onto the dunghill as he passes. Robert the Unhinged is among the hunters, and gives me an odious leer. His teeth are all black stumps. Mother receives a letter saying Aunt Alison, Aunt Agatha, and Aunt Joan have all died in childbirth. We weep for several hours. Afterwards, alone in my room, I sit up thinking until the candle goes out. I am determined not to die at 15 giving birth to fat, unhinged baby with warts. We'll dress as boy and run away to sea. Nurse agrees to make me suit of boy's clothes or steal some of my brother's. Unfortunately, Nurse getting very forgetful these days, and I fear she will make a dress for my brother instead. Go to bed hungry, and awoken at midnight by sound of fox decapitating geese. Feel sometimes that there must be more to life than this. I think I've been born ahead of my time.
And the latest on the pledges, £450 we're up to, including £10 from Baldrick the Cat from Brighton. Perfect, thank you. But we need more to take us back to the 20th century and make a better future for children today. The number to ring with your pledge is 0272 377 377. Now, what I haven't added in so far is the money that we'd already raised even before we went on the air by asking you to write into Woman's Hour from whatever century you chose. And we've had a terrific response from women and men all over the country. One of you even sent us a cheque for £100, bringing the total we raised just from those letters to £611.50, which according to me means that we're over £1,000 already. Oh, if we had world enough and time to broadcast a lot of those letters, but here's just a small selection, as many of them as we could manage, read by those who actually wrote them. These came from Anne Bailey, Doreen Cook, Isabel Vaughan Morgan, Penny Keynes, Denise Panic, Mrs. McMahon, Malcolm McLean, and Mrs. C. Etherden.
Dear Woman's Hour, I was led to believe that Englishmen were chivalrous, amusing, and dare I say it, sexy. Back home in Flanders, before I set out for England, I used to hear the servants giggling in the hall while I was having my portrait painted by that nice Mr. Holborn. They were obviously impressed by King Henry. His reputation as to size, strength, and staying power was the talk of the kitchens. Anyway, here I am in London, and I can't wait to get back home again. I'm supervising my packing at the moment, and I'm leaving at the end of the week. I'm sorry, really, that I upset Henry so. He hasn't spoken to me since our wedding night. I didn't mean to hurt his feelings, and I only laughed for a little while, just at the beginning when he first got into bed. He hasn't any sense of humour at all. Could I ask you to let the public know the truth? I'm sure the history books are going to get things all wrong, and surely by 1988 women will be able to laugh in the bedroom without causing a divorce. Yours, Anne of Cleves.
10th of November, 1868. Recently, I had occasion to call the sweep to my home to clear a bird's nest from the drawing-room chimney. I was shocked to see a small boy sitting in the hearth, covered in soot and bleeding from a wound on his forehead. He looked to be about 7 years old, stark naked, apart from a filthy rag round his loins, and I noticed that he had a club foot. I demanded of the sweep why he was using this poor cripple for such a dangerous and dirty task. The reply was, he was cheaper than a brush, and there were plenty more where he came from, the gutter.
1802, Charmouth. Dear Jenny, I am writing to ask for your help. Last month, all the women in this village were told to go to the top of the hill by the sea. We had to wear our red flannel petticoats over our shoulders, as if we were soldiers in their scarlet jackets. This we did for 3 days in the hope that the French would see us and not make a landing. No French appeared, but our petticoats became torn and damaged. We were told we would be given more flannel, but none has arrived. The winter will soon be with us. We fear the cold and cannot afford to buy any for ourselves.
My complaint is how smelly life is. Perhaps I have an extra sensitive nose, but I find my fellow men and women really smell offensive, even when they are well perfumed. I know that I myself, even though I wash carefully and all over, am unable to control my body odours. My dream is for someone to invent something magic to be placed under the arms to stop sweat there. Or, if that is quite impossible, which I'm sure it must be, to disguise the smell.
But this listener, writing from 1837, has a very much more heart-rending request.
I beg for thy help in finding news of my dear husband, John Vi, whom I have not seen nor heard of these last 4 long years. We come from Tolpuddle, and he was among those men so cruelly transported, like any common murderer or thief, to that barbarous land, Australia. But he was, I swear, innocent of any crime, save that of combining together with his comrades, all farm labouring men, to withstand the cruel exploitations of our masters. Oh, and I have another request. I know you have freedoms that we sought so hard to win, but what is this GCHQ travail? I would dearly like to know more.
And the feature we apparently broadcast in November 1588 on cooking with foods from the New World seemed to strike a chord too.
I dare say that there were many others beside myself who had not realized that removing the outer layer of the potato before immersing it in boiling water or fat significantly improves the taste. But I question the popularity of the product known as tobacco. It seems obvious to me that this presents a very serious fire hazard at a time when so many of us live in half-timbered houses. I myself have observed that my husband's fingers have stained a yellow-brown colour since he started to smoke, and he has developed a most unpleasant cough, which I understand from apothecary friends is not at all uncommon.
Not that all our letters were from women, or from the past. We had one letter from the year 2010.
Dear Manzower, I feel urged to write to you to describe the everyday frustrations of being a man. Many millions of us have to weekly eke out the pittance collected by us from our local post office, described as child benefit. As your listeners will be aware, this has not been increased in spite of rampant inflation since 1987. There is the house to look after, meals to cook, rooms to clean, beds to make, washing and ironing. The list goes on.
Finally, a letter from an exasperated 17th century small businesswoman complaining about the hazards she faced in such a bawdy age.
I came to London but 2 years since. We thought there was an opening for trade in imported fruit, so I began in a small way, selling on the streets and in places of entertainment. Much harassment have I endured. The men of London laugh at my ambitions. They treat me only as a sex object and compare my bosom to the ripe fruit I sell. They make to me lewd suggestions which bring blushes to my maiden cheek. I have been fortunate in finding a well-known public figure who seems interested in what I have to offer. I expect our partnership to be a fruitful one. Other women may not be so fortunate, so please, more items to assist the small businesswoman. Sincerely, your humble servant, Eleanor. Nell Gwynn.
So, did you enjoy sex in the 17th century, Baldrick?
Blimey, no, sir. The last time I enjoyed sex was, 1327, I believe.
1327. Pathetic.
Well, hang about. It's only just gone 2:15 now.
Yes, Baldrick, when I said pathetic, I was anticipating that punchline. Kindly remember that this is Woman's Hour, not the Antiques Roadshow. How's the money total? Good grief, they're a tight-fisted lot. Come on, fork out the cash.
Lie still, my dear love, and my good thing shall out. Oh, Mr. Jones, what are you about? Mr. Jones, what are you about? Lie still, my dear love, and my good thing and toast. It's the Jones that I told you. What in I go, Jones? In I go, Jones.
But what was the woman's perspective on sex in the 17th century? Well, once Cromwell and his Puritans had been disposed of and the monarchy was restored, sex too was restored to a more prominent position in people's lives. In fact, as Dilly Barlow's been hearing from writers Elaine Hobby and Germaine Greer, it seemed to become a rumbustious free-for-all.
Women lived a lot more in the society of other women. There are some extraordinary texts in the 17th century that talk about the embarrassment for men when women were talking together, because they always talked about men's sexual performance, and they were highly satirical about it, and called them dry boots, and because they didn't come, or wet boots because they came too soon, and discussed the size of their member, its willingness, its perkiness, and so on.
But if the man's performance was good for a laugh amongst the women, women's sexuality and pleasure was taken far more seriously by them.
If a teenage girl was going through a period of depression, they called it green sickness. And they thought a good cure for green sickness was sexual pleasure. And there are records, for instance, of midwives teaching young girls to masturbate so that they can have sexual pleasure and stop feeling so depressed.
I think they were much better educated about sex than people were for 200 years afterwards. Because if you even look at things like the anatomy books of the 17th century, they're marvellously explicit about the structure of the vagina, and they all show the clitoris. And they talk very exactly about how the clitoris is what creates a woman's pleasure. That little tiny thing disappeared from the diagrams for another 200 years. And then if you look at popular culture, I mean, women boasted of the size and voraciousness of their vaginas, of their silk-fringed purses and all, and there lots and lots of sexual innuendo.
You see, in those days, they thought that if a woman didn't have an orgasm in sex, she wouldn't conceive. So a man had to give his wife sexual pleasure if he wanted her to get pregnant.
So, a good time for women, it seems. They knew about their bodies, they enjoyed their sexuality. Aye, but therein lies the rub.
Women had thought of themselves as sexual beings with a sexual appetite, but they were not meant to explore or enjoy that sexual appetite with anybody other than their husbands. A woman had to be a virgin to be acceptable as a marriage partner, and once she was married, she had to be faithful to her husband. And in fact, her husband quite literally legally owned her. Look at Restoration comedy, and it's full of flirtatious couples. And you'd think that women had a wonderful flirtatious time.
Your women of honour, as you call them, are only chary of their reputations, not their persons. And 'tis scandal they would avoid, not men. Now may I have, by the reputation of an eunuch, the privileges of one, and be seen in a lady's chamber in the morning as early as her husband, kiss virgins before their parents or lovers, and maybe, in short, the passe-partout of the town.
William Wycherley's hero Horner, in The Country Wife, employed the age-old ruse of pretending to have the pox, which made him impotent, and was therefore allowed free run and reign in the ladies' bedchambers. All Restoration comedies were brimful of such wenching and womanizing, including those of Aphra Behn, the only female writer of the genre. But there's a subtle difference.
There are threatened rape scenes in many of her plays. Women constantly being frightened by men. Women being persuaded to have affairs with men, and once they've agreed, realizing that in the man's eyes they've become no better than whores.
But not all her characters were cowed by men. Helena, in The Rover, speaks up loudly for women's rights.
I am as inconstant as you, for I have considered, Captain, that a handsome woman has a great deal to do whilst her face is good. I see our business as well as humours are alike. Yours to cozen as many maids as will trust you, and I as many men as I have faith.
But of course, in reality, women were not only treated as whores and as possessions, but literally as whipping boys too, according to the evidence of another midwife.
Louise Bourgeois talks about women being kicked by their husbands so hard a particular woman she describes as having been kicked by her husband so that her perineum was broken and her womb was jutting out of her body. And Louise Bourgeois talks about having bound this woman up with bandages so that she could carry a child to term. And in her description there is great rage, but also powerlessness. There was nothing she could do to get this woman away from her husband.
But under any circumstances, childbirth was a gruelling experience. Oddly enough, even then the men were trying to take control of this traditional female domain with dire consequences.
If we go back to Jane Sharp and her midwives book, she talks about the practice, she says, of some men midwives who would give women caesarean sections, of course without anaesthetic. And of course the women always died.
You actually find childbirth becoming more dangerous as you go towards the end of the century. The appearance of the man midwife, who didn't have the foggiest idea what he was doing, who had an interfering attitude towards the natural process, whereas the women midwives tended to let it happen. I mean, it's a rare woman who survives a full childbearing career. Postmenopausal females are rare, and that's another problem because they're so rare that they get treated like witches because people are afraid of them. There is something inhuman about a woman who has lived to the age of 70 or 80.
Even that was not the worst.
I suppose the overriding reason for women to want to escape from the 17th century, though, is that most of them had to experience the agony of child death. And some of them experienced it time and time again, would bear 13, 15 children and bring up 2 or 3. To lose it at birth was bad enough. To lose it at 2 or 3, when you'd got over so many hurdles, you'd weaned it without it dying. And the women slid downhill, sometimes very fast, just dazed by grief and disappointment.
Germaine Greer looking back at woman's lot in the 17th century. More bids, please, for the day's salmon fishing on the Tweed. We are now up to £80, which frankly is pathetic. It won't get you a terribly good day in the season. We've also been offered a day's shooting on the range at Bisley, and that will go again to the highest bidder by the end of the programme. Meanwhile, our total for children in need so far has zoomed past £2,000, and there's still plenty of time to get your pledges in.
Send the money to us at Children in Need. I have my letter opener at the ready, and unless I get thousands of pounds immediately, I shall stick it into the soft, squashy part of Baldrick's useless personage, which he sits on in lieu of a cushion. I refer, of course, to his brain. The number again, please, Baldrick?
02723773777.
They must be punished, Baldrick. What's the worst possible time we could send them to?
It's hard enough being a provincial woman living here a little west of Aquasulis, far from the comforts of Rome, but spare a thought for those at the very frontiers of the empire in the barbarous north. Little wonder that villa prices are so startlingly low there. And let's face it, you can't get much more frontline than Hadrian's Wall, where our reporter, Julia Shaw, has been visiting the wife of the prefect of High Rochester, Aelia Lucilla.
Aelia, we've come into your kitchen. It's a bit dark and it's very hot and really rather smelly in here. There's a lot of people moving about. You're preparing for a very important meal tonight. You've got important visitors.
Yes, we have. The Emperor Septimius Severus is coming on his way up north into Scotland, so we have to prepare a special meal because he's staying the night.
What are the slaves doing there? It looks as though they've got is that a suckling pig?
Yes, we're having suckling pig, spit roasted, and then we're going to have it with a sauce of barley and figs. I've been saving the figs especially for ages now. To start with, we're going to have eggs and oysters and a salad in sauces. For afters, it's going to be stewed fruit, plums, cherries, apples, and also sort of, I don't know how you describe it really. It's bread which is soaked in milk and fried in honey. It's all good.
But the figs, now that really is something special. You must have got those from Rome.
Yes, I was sent those as a present, and I say I've been saving them for a special occasion. Well, this is my dining room. Welcome to my dining room.
Now, this is a large room, and I expected it to be rather cold, coming especially as we have done from the kitchen. But in fact, it's really quite warm.
Well, this is our public room, our best room. So here we have underfloor heating, which makes the room nice and warm, but it takes the toll on the furniture, because things like our very expensive shale table there, if that gets too warm, it dries and splits and has to be kept regularly oiled.
You've got 2 young children, a little girl Flavia and a son Marcus. He's just 5.
That's right, yes.
Do you plan on having any more?
Well, I'm hoping not to. I do take precautions. My mother recommended that I used wool soaked in olive oil with douches of vinegar or lemon juice. Lemon juice is quite hard to get here, though. There are various methods. My sister-in-law swears by hanging the dried uterus of a mule round her neck. I don't know whether that would work. She's got 4 children, so I suspect it doesn't work. But she reckons that we don't know how many she would have had if she didn't tie the dry uterus of a mule around her neck, so I suppose that's a possible argument.
And of course, you actually breastfed your children. You breastfed the first one, didn't you?
Yes, I breastfed the first one. There was nobody else to do it. There was nobody available. One of the Greek doctors, Serranus, recommends that one has the baby breastfed by a wet nurse for the first 3 weeks, and then the mother takes over, but that didn't work, I'm afraid.
What do Roman women generally feel about breastfeeding? Is it something you enjoy doing?
I don't know if enjoy is the word. I mean, if you can pay somebody else or have somebody else available to do it, why do it yourself? But I think a lot of people feel that the mother breastfeeding forges links between the child and the mother. I don't know whether this has been proved or not.
It's really very much frontier territory here. You're very much at the furthest edge of the empire. You're quite a distance from the wall here. Do you feel in any kind of danger, a woman here?
It is quite dangerous. I'm not allowed to go out of the fort by myself without a guard of soldiers. The native northern tribesmen tend to wander around the hills in small bands. Of course, the emperor is bringing his troops with him. They're going to press the frontier forward. His intention is to try and sort out the northern tribesmen for once and for all, because they have been very troublesome recently. This is why we're here, but I am one of the most northerly Roman ladies.
It really is particularly isolated and windswept. It was a howling gale blowing as I came through the courtyard, although here it's relatively protected. But do you feel the cold at all?
Oh, yes, and the fog is awful. I've never come across fog before. It doesn't do anybody any good. Most of the soldiers have gone down with chest complaints at some stage, and the fort medical officer has been getting amphoras full of wine flavoured with horehound, which he seems to think is good for coughs.
Do you miss out on all the gossip and the friendships that you had in Rome?
Oh, I do. There's nobody really in the area who understands some of the political gossip, what's going on, the fashions, that sort of thing. The nearest officer's wife is at Habitancum, but she's a German and very provincial, doesn't even speak particularly good Latin. Otherwise, I have to rely on going down to Eboracum, where the court of the emperor is at the moment, and the Empress Julia Domna and her ladies-in-waiting are all there, and occasionally I get a good gossip with them and find out what's going on. It's particularly interesting because, of course, she has a different hairstyle, and I've noticed that the women in Britain are all changing their hairstyles to copy hers. Before this, we had to rely on getting new coins, and every time we had a new coin, we looked to see what the hairstyle was and copied it. But this time, she's actually there, and we can see. So I've been experimenting with this hairstyle. It's not been very successful so far. I can't keep it up in that sort of style, and the pins keep falling out.
It's swept up very elegantly up off your neck. Would you say that you're happy with your life here?
I think so. That's a difficult question, isn't it? I'm with my husband at the front, which is far better than being stuck in Rome wondering and worrying what's happening. I miss quite a bit about Rome and the luxuries there. One doesn't notice things are luxuries until you're up here. But no, I think I'm reasonably content.
In those days, of course, I marched with the legions.
Did you?
Yeah, I was a Roman centipede.
You don't mean a Roman centurion, do you? No. No, you don't.
We're up to £150 now for the salmon fishing. That's a bit more like it, but keep those bids coming in. The Sea Salter Shellfish Company, Tongue Twisters division, I think, have offered 24 Whitstable oysters for auction, which is what they reckon Blackadder would be having for his breakfast. The bidding for those to start at £10. The phones have been going absolutely mad, and our phone girls have volunteered to keep the lines open as long as you want. Our grand total so far, 2,500.
Right, Boarder, got the money?
Yep, there's quite a lot, actually.
Right, give it to me. Let's scarper.
What? Ow!
Did you get my drift?
I can't do that, Mr. Blackadder. The money belongs to children in need.
Get out of my way, Baldric. Ow!
Oh, I've wanted to do that for centuries.
And safely back at last in the 20th century with all the money safe and sound, it's time for our serial, Memory by Mark.